co-founder, of course, of Palantir. But I want to ask you, I want to start with just an AI question. Everybody was going, AI crazy in Davos. And the thing that I can't figure out is whether AI is going to be so pervasive that it becomes sort of a commoditized feature of basically every piece of software that everybody has, or whether it's actually going to be going to ultimately create new standalone products that create new value. Meaning, you look at some of these, if it's just going to be a feature of everything, then the question is how much more value is it creating in these in the companies that either already exist or the new companies? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, AI, Andrew, is going to be something that impacts productivity. That's what really matters here, right? At the end of the day, what are we all doing with these markets, with these businesses? You want to create more with less. You want to create more prosperity for society. When you have something like electricity, I mean, it takes decades to work its way through everything, right? Electricity, I think 30 years in, you finally had factories designed to use electricity. But even in the first decade, it did a lot of other things.
Right.
AI right now, it's going after a lot of areas. We're seeing already how it could raise the margins, how it could address things. There's lots of service areas of the economy. I'll give you one example. Healthcare billing is a $280 billion revenue area, and we're already seeing how AI is probably going to be able to double the margins in that area, which basically means you pull $100 billion of spend out of the economy. That's new wealth it creates through productivity. There's probably going to be trillions of dollars of that the next 5 years.
You think in the next 5 years that happens?
I think you actually see by the mid to late 2020s, like economic numbers showing up where productivity's gone up.
Do you think, though, I was thinking Con Ed, which is electricity in New York, it's not a great high flyer of a stock because at some point it does become commoditized. So is there like a period right now which is like a renaissance and then it gets commoditized? The other thing that I worry about or think about is whether we're in 1996 or 1999 where there's just going to be too much of an almost overinvestment in this area, and there's going to be a lot of collateral damage when it's over.
I mean, the way markets work with new possibilities is there always is overinvestment. There's a few big platforms that emerge that are going to be extraordinarily valuable. The same way in the late 90s you had things like Amazon born, you have Google born. Obviously, those would have been really good bets. You have a lot of other things that there's too much hype. But then basically you have these infrastructure for AI that makes a lot of money because 2 or 3 or 5 things emerge as winners there.
Right.
And then the whole economy benefits. If productivity goes up as much as it looks like it's going to do, that makes money for every one of us. And that's a good thing for the whole society.
Do you think there's more value in the software piece or the hardware piece? One of the things that I think has been fascinating to hear, people were talking about it actually in Davos, is Sam Altman, who was there from OpenAI, clearly has been looking around to try to raise money to actually start manufacturing chips. In the old world, chips were never considered a valuable thing to do. And by the way, maybe in 10 years from now, there'll be an overabundance of chips and nobody will care about chips anymore. But for the next 5 or 10 years, it seems like people won't be able to get enough of them.
The infrastructure of chips is critical to make this work. If you can make chips commoditized, that means the rest of us are going to be all very well off because you're going to be applying it to the whole economy. I mean, the most money is going to be made, frankly, for the S&P 500, for the big companies that are more productive overall. That's where the real money gets made if this works. But we need the chips to do that. I mean, Sam's thinking, how can I apply this technology? How do we scale it? There's a scarcity of chips. So it's really smart to do.
In the defense world, how do you think it fundamentally changes things? I mean, we were talking to your co-founder, Alex Karp, about sort of how AI is going to impact his business. He's leveraging ChatGPT and some of these other large language models as well. So the question is, do you have to create your own model? Is it really just about taking somebody else's model and applying it to what you're doing?
Well, it was really cool. I guess OpenAI opened up to defense now. But listen, in the defense world, software is becoming more important. AI makes software determinative in defense. We already have all these new companies needed in defense because the old big primes, the big legacy defense contractors, they're really good at hardware. They're pretty bad at software. Thanks to AI, you now desperately need all the new companies in defense because there's a bigger gap there.
What does that mean, determinate? Like determine
it means that
or you mean determining what lines you kind of follow?
It means determining like what technologies are dominant in warfare, right? So if you have AI being as good as it is now, suddenly it really, really matters to have the best software. If you're going to be doing, like, you want to get a certain amount of money for a certain amount of outcome, right? So if you're going to be building 1,000 small autonomous drones for some kind of battle scenario, if you have AI, you desperately are going to need the best software companies involved in that. Otherwise, you're going to lose that battle. You're going to not be deploying it correctly.
When we started Palantir in 2003, we've been watching, because, at PayPal, obviously, as you know, we had to arrest these bad guys from the Russian and Chinese mafia and had to work with FBI and Secret Service. And I got to know some of these guys, being exposed to these workflows there. And it just became clear that the gap was growing so big. And you saw us after 9/11, the government in the U.S. spent billions, really tens of billions of dollars about how we're going to rebuild our systems to detect what's going on, to watch terrorists, to eliminate terrorists. And the way they were spending the money, Oren, it was just obviously wrong to anyone involved in the technology ecosystem on the West Coast. It was pathetic, frankly. It was very broken. And so the gap kind of at that point was like, okay, wow, something has to be done. And so we built Palantir. It was not set up for a new entrant to come in. So we had to be extremely stubborn, extremely persistent. Even when things we were doing were like 10 times better, it would take years sometimes to kind of shame them into working with us on something that was obviously the right thing to do, because there were some good allies that wanted to have the best answers. A lot of corruption to help the insiders. And the, I think because of Palantir's success, and then because of SpaceX's success as well, breaking through and being so critical to national defense, you start to get a lot of people saying, okay, wait a second, we do need to go to the new guys. We do need to go to the outsiders. This is way more advanced. This is better. And so when Anduril came along, they learned a lot of lessons about how to do it. Anduril has now basically formed the third prime. So it's Palantir, SpaceX, Anduril. Anduril was three guys who were Palantir plus Palmer. Obviously a proud investor there too. They're doing amazing stuff. Palmer with his Roadrunner, you can show off this week. Super cool new things they're releasing. And Trey and Brian have done a great job. They're building that company with him. And so now you have this kind of like rebel alliance of new things that are functional. And both Palantir and Anduril have become this new prime that kind of is helping new things get in, helping partnering with them. But I'll tell you what, I don't want to completely write off all the old companies. We do have some very functional parts and very talented parts, within Raytheon, within General Dynamics, within L3. Like we've spent as a country tens of billions of dollars on a lot of advanced technology. And sure, there are parts where Anduril's running circles around them. There's parts where my new company's running circles around them. They're not always the best innovators, especially when it comes to software. You guys don't understand software cultures.
Yeah.
But for some of these areas, they are the best in the world. And so we're going to be partnering with them. And some of them, when they don't learn how to partner with the new guys and they don't work with us well, we're going to run circles around them and they're going to shrink and we're going to beat them for contracts. And where they do, then we're going to succeed. And what's happening now is you're finally opening up the DoD to a lot of these competitions.
Being allowed in at PayPal was a really big deal. I think Max rejected me the first time as a freshman. We had an argument on a whiteboard and I thought he was going to bring me in anyway. I don't think he remembers this. This is, Peter's co-founder of Confinity at the time. So being at PayPal and learning from people there was really important. Peter taking me to work for him directly afterwards. And, I got exposed, of course, at that point to like the Facebook people and to the Kevin Hart's at Zoom and all these guys I was getting to work with. In the macro fund. And then, convincing him to fund Palantir and keep it going when a lot of people were trying to fight against it. At the time, you probably know, there were all sorts of crazy projects that were going on in kind of Peter Thiel world. I think there was one thing that was giving people nightmares and other things that, some brain stimulation. There was like a spam company. There was a restaurant that I think ended up losing $7 million because the chef got into arguments with people. This is, by the way, very typical. Peter's a genius. I've learned a lot from. When you've had success, you have a lot of stuff you try. People around you try things. But imagine Palantir was like these, I think 3 of us who were like 21. I guess Nathan was like maybe a little older, maybe he's late 20s. And we were all just like building things for spies, for intelligence. So that sounded probably even crazier than the restaurant and the brain simulation thing, right? We're trying to get budget to travel to DC and talk to the spies. So people were trying to turn it off. So convincing them to keep that going, I think that was really critical as well at the time. For all it takes for evil to win is for good men to do nothing. Like we need people to stand up and we need people to model what leadership and courage looks like here.
And then we were kind of watching after 9/11 how the U.S. was reacting and doing things in software the same way they had 20 or 30 years before, and we were horrified, right? And so I think a lot of us said, wow, it's like a patriotic duty. It's a mission to help defense. And I guess you could argue that was more naturally something that people who are biased towards patriotism, biased towards kind of love of country would be doing. I tend to think, when we started Palantir, it wasn't like it was a bunch of Republicans. I think we're probably more Democrats than there were Republicans on the team at Palantir early on, but they were probably moderate Democrats. So in a sense, it wasn't like it was like a politically oriented thing, but you did have people who really did want to like fight for the U.S. and fight for our allies as part of it. And I tend to think the reason that Palantir and Anduril and these companies are controversial is more tied to like, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's more tied to the dynamic in our society that's very polarized today, where you have extreme voices on the left and the right, kind of shaping the dialogue, right? So one of them is you build a culture where you're solving hard problems that are interesting and you're empowering people and giving them a lot of intellectual freedom and ability to be part of figuring out how you're going to do things and what they're going to get to work on within the company. And I think a lot of people, they do like to be somewhere
where they're paid very well. They're not necessarily going to make 10 million a year, but they're paid very well, and they're getting to work on important problems. And you're exposing again them to the challenges and to who they're helping. So I think you can keep a lot of great people. Palantir has really impressed me with the quality of people who are still there, with the bar the culture has kept, even as like the equity upside can't possibly be quite what it was, when we started it 19 years ago. And same with Anduril. It's just such an inspiring mission. Like, to be an Anduril, you get to be exposed to like one of the coolest defense, possibly the coolest defense company in the world, working on this like hardware, software solutions, and you get to work with Iron Man basically, right? So it's interesting for people to get to do that. And so I think in order to keep people at these places, it has to be growing. It does have to have upside where it's growing and it's winning, but it also you have to have other great people there, and you have to be inspired by the mission. And it's all about creating cultures. Frankly, it's really hard. I'm still learning how to do it, but it's it's much easier to start new companies. But I'm still trying to learn how to help the big ones too.